Today on Accelerating Excellence, we have João Macedo, one of the first to surf the monstrous waves at Nazaré and a pioneer in big wave riding. João has surfed walls of water the size of 8-storey buildings at Mavericks at Nazaré with no rope, no safety net, and seconds to survive if he gets it wrong. This is not about thrill seeking. It's about standing inside a collapsing skyscraper of water and choosing presence over panic. João's life is built around timing, feel, and flow. The same principles that drive elite performance in every arena. João's story is raw, from Portugal, Australia, California, from spiritual clarity to brutal hold downs. He's built a life on respect, flow, at the edge of survival. This is what it means to live with purpose and stake everything on it. This is Accelerating Excellence. João, welcome to the podcast, mate. Great to have you on. How you doing?
Great, James. Good to be on. Good to be on here with you.
Brilliant. Now, I just want to start off nice and simple, mate. Can you just help orientate people, where this insane journey you've been on so far all began?
Well, it's kind of cool. We were just chatting a bit. It's right here. This is where I started surfing. This is where we now have our Hope Zones Foundation office. And my grandmother would take me to the beach all summer long. And I just started this connection to the ocean. And lucky enough, I don't come from a family of surfers, but definitely it runs very deep in Portugal, this connection, to the ocean and to the Atlantic in specific.
Yeah, of course. And in terms of those experiences, is there one that stands out as an earliest memory of your concept of the ocean or a surfboard, or one or the other? Because I guess is it a mutual love affair? Is that fair to say, with the ocean and with surfing?
Well, I get the ocean is definitely a force of nature, and so if we are blessed, to connect, that's, I guess, a little bit of the generosity. For me, it's absolutely, just a full-on passion and just a driver and everything in my life. But definitely, and it's so cool to share this with you, James. The fact that, many years ago, right, and being on the beach with my grandmother and just having fun and just finding this way of being more active at the beach. The beach obviously is a place of recreation and a place of just, kind of this healthy idleness, right? That you're just hanging out at the beach and that's what you do. But to have this activity that you'd go into the water and this beach, Praia Grande and Praia das Maçãs, this Atlantic coastline is very close to the westernmost tip of Europe, the Cape of Roca. And so it's very exposed to the Atlantic. And so at the time, we didn't really understand just why the waves were so powerful, but over time and connecting with the ocean and having to deal with the ferocity of it here, it did kind of give me a base that would then be what I would build on to continue to evolve and gain the mastery of the big waves.
Amazing. And was there a moment where you sort of realized, hey, I'm pretty good at this?
It took a while because in Portugal we got a little bit late into professional surfing and got a little bit late even into big wave surfing even later. And it was actually, so I went through college. I was, now in retrospect and what I'm doing with my career now, environmentally, I'm very grateful for that. But at the time, it was taking, training time. And so it was something that was a little bit tough, I would say, in the sense that I just wasn't putting all the pieces together. And so I went through college a little bit, I wish I was born in Hawaii kind of thing. Obviously, only later, all of these things kind of come together and you're just a bit more settled in where you come from, who you are, all those things. But yeah, it was actually in Australia. I was really lucky enough to do an exchange program in Australia. and I was in a town, Merriweather in Newcastle on the east side of Australia. And
Mhm.
obviously the Australians are, one of the leading nations in surfing, in professional surfing, and it runs extremely deep. Every
Mhm.
single beach town has an amazing surfer, has a club. So it was very interesting to be immersed in that and to be appreciated as a high level surfer in that environment. So that for me really was kind of like very special. Obviously, going through the ranks here as a junior and all that, but it was something that it just felt a little bit like a Portuguese bubble. That we were a couple of guys that were really pushing it, but we
Yeah.
weren't really sure that we could hold our own outside, and so that was a definitely a turning point.
And would you say that, because that's such an interesting point you've made there, there's almost this, because you're talking about perception ultimately, aren't you? There's this perception that you're this, smaller bubble, as you sort of described, but then you step out that comfort zone, I guess, when you're maybe competing or going up against some of the guys that are maybe in that bigger bubble. But that's often the the experience you need to make you sort of change your perceptions of maybe what you have inside yourself. Did it change your perceptions when you sort of compared your ability to these guys that perhaps you maybe as a younger guy put on a pedestal? It's like, wow, these top Australian guys, but then you're out there and you're maybe, oh wow, okay, maybe I have something here. Was that?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
exactly it. And I think that's one of the healthiest things is to kind of like, really face that fear, right? Ultimately. And I think that's then
Yeah.
kind of been a big part of my career, obviously, because Big Waves has the fear factor kind of embedded,
Oh
but just
shit.
with peers, like just in terms of like how do you stand up with your peers. And so I think having that is something that I highly recommend. And really, I mean, you probably have seen this more than many. How these are those moments when you actually do go out and
Yeah.
face, that perception of just wanting to sometimes stay in the bubble. And I think that that push that is just so healthy for young people making their career or at any stage really, but it's definitely absolutely it's a turning point. And I learned many things that I wanted to improve, so it's not like things, it's like a new beginning, right?
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, it's such a powerful message, I think, for anyone listening to that. That it's a beautiful side of competition, which is often described as like an ugly thing in today's society. But there's almost a war on competition in some
Yeah.
areas of society, maybe in the UK more than Portugal. But what you've just described there is, I think, that beautiful aspect of it. It gives you an opportunity to reflect and see and reassess maybe what you have in your locker by stepping up and having a game against some of the top guys.
It's fascinating. And I think, yeah, James, sorry to pick up on that, but yeah, I really, yeah, I think it's absolutely key in our day and age, and when, we are blessed, right? We are living in peace, yes, there's always threats and, we have to be aware of that. But the fact that, we do come from this place that we're able to have education, we are able to have, I mean, drinking water. Come on,
Yeah, yeah,
these things are not
absolutely.
given, and power. Yes, there's some outages. Okay, we just had one. But come on. I mean, this is
That's incredible.
extremely blessed times, and if we don't have a little bit, and I really see that in the youth, and again, I've been lucky enough to train and have this side as a coach of youth, and my personal connection to competition was not always the most linear because surfing is such a free and creative activity, and then to kind of format it and put rules on it was
Yes,
it was restrictive.
very
And
interesting.
so for me as a youth, a junior, it was difficult to incorporate that and understand that, and my results wouldn't always reflect my ability. And you know but I really feel I was, blessed in the sense that I wasn't, I just kept doing it, and I
Yeah,
think that for the youth coming up, you just keep, because it's just such an experiment of lessons. You're just constantly, because you're just putting yourself a little bit against the wall. You're just exposing yourself to trying to learn. And if you have good mentoring, and this is, I think, where things can really
yeah,
make an
absolutely.
absolutely massive difference, because if you don't interpret these lessons in a constructive way,
And even competition in a constructive way, you know?
that's exactly it. It
Yeah,
can be devastating for a young
absolutely.
mind. And or if a coach is just all he wants is results, that's
Hmm.
devastating. And it's really, instead of building up to mastery and really becoming a master of your activity, a master of your sport, a master of your art, then you're actually looking at short-term results as something that defines you. And it can be really devastating. And I've seen it, obviously this is something that is discussed very broadly, but coaching can really have such a lifting aspect when you can contextualize what you learn, what you can go to the next one. And as a youth, it's all about the process. That's what it's
Mm.
all about. No one remembers, I mean, unless you're like in surfing, who was the world under 16 champion, who was
Yeah,
because
yeah.
as juniors, it's all setup work to then become a pro, an adult, right? And so it's really key to, because it is intense, and that's
Of
the
course.
reality of it. And competition
Especially
is,
if you're driven, right? If you're driven and
yeah,
you're
you want it.
hard-headed and you're competitive, of
You
course you want
want
to
it.
win. And I think it's what you're saying there is bang on. It's that I think it's something so important to get right, the narrative around winning in competition, because it
Exactly.
can be a prison or it can be the key to that sets
Both
you.
both
Yeah.
sides. So the winners as youth also have a lot of difficulty, because then when they
Yeah.
face, like what we were discussing, this bigger bubble, the international bubble, the
Yeah, yeah.
European bubble, when they get out of their, local hero status, and then suddenly they hit into, this global wall, if they are not prepared to deal with, these failures, because I mean, and even calling it a failure is so relative, but it's a lesson. And if you're
Yeah.
not built to kind of reassess and go back to the drawing, because you've been winning your whole junior career, then when that
Yeah.
first defeat comes, which is inevitable, it's really difficult to pick up the pieces and kind of the perception of the shattered dream kind of thing. And
Yeah.
that's brutal. But losing, obviously, if it's not understood as also part of a process, the tendency to give up is pretty immediate too.
Mm.
It's something. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've probably lost some real talent because of that. And I think that learning to lose is a skill in itself. And in terms of, I guess, that experience in Australia, or were there any other experiences like that where you felt you hit a real inflection point again, going from I enjoy this, it feels like it's inherently part of me, but like, oh, I am good at this. Like, what have I got here? Where was there that curiosity? Was it always there, or were there some specific moments that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always such a privilege to look back and definitely think about these inflection points and these moments. And I was lucky enough also to travel to Hawaii. My sponsor gave me a ticket to go to Hawaii when I was 16. And at the time, it was a similar thing. Like I didn't quite understand the context, but I caught at Pipeline, which is this iconic wave there, a really
Yeah,
big wave. And for my age, and so that was the moment. Again, I was at the time there wasn't really a context to kind of fit in, but personally it was a really good moment. And
well, if other people are certainly seeing that potential in you anyway, right? If they're going to sponsor you to go and do things like that.
yeah, but it was kind of something that, because there wasn't really a big wave scene, this was years before the Nazaré phenomena here.
Hmm.
And there wasn't really an understanding. So there was like, okay, this is a young junior talent, going to Hawaii is part of it. But to actually make and get a wave there, at this iconic place, um, then coming back, it wasn't like I wasn't really able to follow up on it. And so that was something that it
Hmm.
was really special looking back. But at the time, it didn't really leverage, let's say, my surfing career. But that's the thing. Personally, it was just part of my growth. And there was another one, I guess, because you're bringing me back to those moments. But in Madeira, which is this island just south
Ronaldo,
off.
Cristiano Ronaldo, we all know Madeira, man.
Yeah, of
Of
course.
course we
Yeah, there
do.
you go. Exactly. But it has these amazing waves. I mean,
Yeah.
perfect big waves. And there's this iconic place called Jardim do Mar on the west coast. And it's become, a world famous big wave surfing spot. And there was this giant swell. This was kind of before forecast, and I just happened to be there with a team of friends, and it was a waiting period for a contest. I wasn't in the contest, but I was kind of, just kind of soaking it in, and a giant swell came through, and just to be part of that and catch waves again. So this is the kind of things like when the ocean kind of like suddenly turns on and becomes
Yeah.
massive, and you're like, am I going to be try to be part of this? I'm going to try to go out there and challenge myself. Can I catch a wave? These are kind of like the kind of simple but pure things of what when the ocean throws you these massive challenges. And I got one. And so that was like really,
Incredible.
really cool. And it was, I was lucky, a guy filmed it, and then it made it into this film actually later in my life. And this is kind of I guess it all connects when we think about these things. But yeah, and so Save the Waves Coalition, it was at the very start of this nonprofit organization that specialized in surf ecosystem protection, and that film and that image, because a campaign was actually, the organization started around protecting this wave, Jardim do Mar. Unfortunately, there was a break wall. There was some public infrastructure that really didn't seem needed. And so the organization started as a campaign to bring awareness about how waves can actually bring value to the community, so that it's something to be protected, something to be cherished and celebrated. And so the organization literally started around this wave. And I had this image, so it ended up being one of the images that was going around, in the film. And I later on would come to work for Save the Waves, and it's been one of the most amazing organizations to have been part of. And the World Surfing Reserves movement was created within this organization, and it was a very important moment for me as an environmentalist, being co-founder of the World Surfing Reserves movement, and it just kind of unleashed a lot of things too.
And was that something you think you always had in you? Were you always conscious of the environment growing up, or was it not until you'd experienced events like that you really sort of started to pay attention there?
I think it was pretty early on, and as a coach, it was something that, again, there were these values of just how lucky we were as surfers to interact with nature. So that was something that I always felt we kind of had this ideal position to share what we feel, and how important a connection to nature is, and how it also keeps you humble in a certain way, because without being, it does really touch the divine, and it goes into this next level of human interaction with what's around us, because it's just such a brutal force, and superior, to an individual. And so, yes, having these amazing sessions is radical, and people really, get excited. And so, but we know when you're there, you really know that you're just like trying to, thrive, yes, but on the edge of survival too. And so that combination of preparing yourself for these moments keeps you in check, because you really know when it comes down to it that you are interacting with the force. You're not dominating. Yes, on the outside, you make finals, you win contests, you get awards, all these things. But deep down, you always know that it's an interaction. It's not like a domination thing. And so I think that humbleness is embedded in surfing.
Understood. Yeah, it's sort of something. It almost feels part of almost the cultural perception of the surfing community. And in terms of, you talked about mentors a while back, and I'm interested in both, I guess, your role as a surfer, as an environmentalist. Throughout your career, have you had any people that have again maybe assisted you with an inflection, or really opened your eyes, or leveled you up through training, coaching, feedback?
And that's what's cool, James, to be able to be on your show and stuff, because I think that question is just so key, right? Because for sure, I feel it's impossible to achieve success in wherever you are, without having that opportunity to have some mentorship, to be able to listen, right, and to kind of absorb lessons. And growing up as a junior, a shaper. So this guy called Álvaro Pereira, this Brazilian guy who moved from Brazil and was building surfboards. And the surfboard is kind of like this very special. It's the most special, let's say, piece of equipment because it's the one that connects you to the waves, and so you can have a magic board, and there's all this aura around the shapers
Like
because
Harry Potter getting his wand.
pretty much,
Yeah,
literally,
yeah.
and so a magic board just puts you in places on the wave are just incredible. It gives you tremendous confidence, and so he believed in me, and we would go together to contests, and he was kind of like trying to, in his way. I had another surfer, a junior that was, he had a little bit more free time at the time, so he was always beating me, but I was in that conversation, and so the fact that he picked me up and he kind of also believed in me was something really, really key that just kept me, in it, and just wanting to improve and learning about the craft of building boards. From an environmental perspective, as I was mentioning, Save the Waves, the founder, a guy from California called Will Henry, he was really, just a very special individual to this day, and just a visionary. And his belief in surfing's potential to influence and change behaviors in terms of conservation was key, and kind of part of that time in California was a very famous environmental lawyer, a guy called Mark Massara, who also kind of integrated this idea that if you are able to obviously work really hard and do what you have to do, but have fun at doing it, that really has its own energy in itself, and then it becomes something that is very powerful. So to keep the balance, that you really have to enjoy what you're doing, so that then when these barriers come up, that you can kind of like keep pushing through.
Amazing. What a powerful lesson to learn at a young age. That's one you'd love to upload into every kid on the planet, isn't it?
It's true.
And in terms of your career, I mean, I have to ask, what were some of the most significant moments for you from a performance perspective, where you felt like if there was a moment where you felt, wow, this has come together, I've made it, I am, top, you're one of the best in the world at what I do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was this time in California and being part of this community at Mavericks and, this iconic wave just south of San Francisco, and a very kind of special group of people kind of really dedicated to it. And through that, I qualified to be on the Big Wave World Tour, and it was at its inception. But when I made finals, when I finished the year and I was in the top five and being part of that awards, it was something that really, it was kind of something that really, it just said, wow, this is it. Surfing really has always been part of my life, but this is something that, this award really does, being part of this group really
Yeah,
does
yeah.
mean something. And it reinforced what I had, kind of scratched the surface in Australia, and then going back to this, obviously powerhouse of a surf nation in California. And so that was an extremely special moment. And then later on in Nazaré, kind of being able to years later kind of replicate that performance and make finals again, and be in that conversation. And, at the time it was, I was always running my surf school. So I was always one of those pros that had a lot going on. And
Yeah.
sometimes I would think, oh gosh, maybe if I just focused just on the surfing, maybe, I made the finals, and that's something that I've had to work with a lot personally, and understand that ultimately my goal was to be part of of that elite, part of that conversation. And the truth is that then to sometimes go into even a higher level within that, that's sometimes the things that you have to sacrifice. At the time, I didn't really understand that, but that is something that you have to go through. And I honor, the champions. I honor the guys that, literally sometimes there are decisions that are made at that level, and I guess it reminds me of that film Icarus, and we had
Okay.
some guys in big wave surfing who passed, and that was something that I thought to myself, that's just not me, like
Mhm.
I do not, obviously I love the risk, otherwise I wouldn't be doing it,
Of course.
but there's just something that I feel this gravitation to my students. I really want to still be there for them, and obviously the thrill to improve my performance and be a master at what I am, that was my main driver. And it's interesting in coaching that that's the thing, that sometimes, yes, you have to work on it, but I think staying true to your values, and everyone has their own journey. But that was something that really on the one hand, and now looking back that I've retired from the big wave, from the World Surf League, and that now I'm focusing on other goals, environmental goals, that it's part of my journey, but that it is interesting that if you are able to really isolate everything and just focus on something, there's a beauty to that. And that's where I am now regarding environmental victories. And so it kind of feels good because it's
That's
setting
where we
me up.
need you. That's where the world needs you.
And sometimes, I mean, just to add to that, sometimes I think a lot of champions, they do run out a little bit of gas, because they put so much into that then on the later part of their career, obviously there's a special group that keep, just yearning, and it's just an endless thing. But it's just interesting to, really appreciate your own journey. And I think you were really, giving me freedom to kind of express myself on those lines. And I think that's it. It's your own journey that you really have to honor. And yes, it's great, to be aware of champions and what they do or don't do. But really, I think that, again, going back to this, what the youth and what our planet ultimately probably needs, it is that honoring of your journey, and
Absolutely. You
I
be
think
you and
that's
follow your path, right? I don't think there's anything more important than that. And listening to it, like trusting your gut there. And there's
yeah.
so many interesting things that have come up there. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, one I have to ask because we've got a real cool intro reel for this conversation. But whenever I've seen your videos over the years, whether you flick them through or our mutual friend Pedro's flicked something through,
Yeah.
I'm sort of shitting my pants looking at it on my phone. And that's where the word fear, right? Fear's, of course, always going to be proportionate to your preparedness to meet that demand that's imposed on you.
Hmm.
But how do you distinguish fear that protects you versus fear that limits you?
Yeah, that's a big one, isn't it?
And I mean
I
that in the
think,
context of maybe it's moving to Australia, by the way, or being at the top of one of those ridiculous waves that I've seen you on.
yeah, no, I think that's the beauty of it, and some of the, and exploring this kind of in this public speaking arena, and there's this joy that big wave surfing kind of brings. It's a really amazing conversation opener, because it's just such a visceral thing to see
Mm.
a human, at the peak of what he's doing, going down, this giant mountain of water, and
You can't
you
take
know,
your eyes off it. If
and
anyone that
yeah,
hasn't
and
seen it,
even as a non-surfer, and I think that
yeah.
side of this kind of universal aspect, I think is really exciting and awesome as a surfer. What we try to kind of say to ourselves within our community, and when you're pushing through these barriers, is that respect is absolutely key. So
Mhm.
respect is really something that cannot you cannot lower your guard. So you have to always respect the ocean, respect nature. Really keep it at that level that you're in a certain way in awe of this broader, greater force. But that is different from fear. And so fear blocks you. Fear does not let you act. It does not let you perform. It does not let you thrive. It doesn't let you enjoy the fact that you are immersed, in our case, in the ocean. And so a lot of the drills and the mental work would be to somehow just abstain from that fear and just try to like appreciate the fact that you're right here right now, and that you are just watching this beauty, nature just
Mm.
absolutely at its max, just doing its thing, and that from there you're just trying to do what you've been, practicing your whole life for, and then you kind of let go of that, and you trust the outcome, and you trust your team, and you trust what you're doing, and you trust that you're there for a reason. But you have to be obsessed with that with being part of it, because when so much pressure, and the violence, I mean, Nazaré and Maverick, I mean, these places are of an extreme violence. I mean, they really are like radical places. And
Well, people die doing what you do, right? I mean, it's very real.
it's very
It
real.
doesn't get more real than that.
And if you reach too far, it is the truth. So, that you might not come up, or not come up on time. And so, that part of things, of letting it go, and just actually finding a way, even with all this pressure, even with all that's going around you, but that you're actually able to let go and just kind of really appreciate it, embrace it, is something that every single session you're from ground zero again. So every single session you go out, you have to kind of go through those motions. You might have had the most amazing session the day before, but here we go again. Okay, we have to, keep the respect high, not overdo it, not over.
I bet you get reminded quick, right? It's not like, okay, losing possession enough, no disrespect. I know there's some Premier League guys listening to this podcast and specifically this episode, but you lose possession on a football pitch, you don't get the same slap in the face you get if you make a mistake, in the scenario you're in, right?
Absolutely.
That must be a harshest reminder, that almost, imagine that's the ultimate constraint that forces that humility and respect.
Constantly. Exactly. No, that's exactly it. And you cannot be afraid of falling, because that will bring in too much fear and too much, pressure. So you have to be able to know that you're prepared physically, mentally for a fall. But when that happens, it's brutal, and it's traumatic, and we all have nightmares, and wake up with lack of air, and just it's just something that then that's the thing. If you don't work on it, it will haunt you, and it will block you, and the fear that
I love that sentence. I love that sentence. If you don't work on it, it will haunt you, because that is it, isn't it? That's the antidote to
you got to
work.
That's it. That's exactly, yeah, absolutely. Because it's right there. And so if you don't prepare, if you don't do this stuff, and you have to find your own, way of training, or cross training, or, I remember for me, it was always being connected to the ocean. Any moment I had, regardless if the winds were good or bad, it would just be, go out there, immerse yourself, understand more. You're always getting more knowledge around your equipment, So that would be the ocean component. I was lucky enough to, Pedro introduced me to, a Muay Thai master. So a bit of the combat side of things, obviously super good on your body. The apnea, training the underwater in a pool, in a more controlled environment. You start learning how much more gas you have in the tank. So, and then I had a mental coach, and so he would also, from the performance side, help contextualize and bring me out of, if it's like a failure in the short term, but, kind of bring it, always give me that ability to zoom out a little bit and understand the process and work on that process.
Sorry to interrupt, but before we dive deeper into the conversation, I want to express how grateful I am that you're choosing to spend your time here. I also want to take a moment to ask for your support. I want to bring you the best podcast I can. And by hitting that like button, subscribing to the podcast, or a one-click review, you play a vital role. When you hit that like button, leave a rating or subscribe, you enable the podcast to reach a much wider audience. And the wider our audience, the easier it is for guests within my network to convince their agents and management teams to free up their diary and come on our show. Thank you in advance for your likes, reviews, and subscriptions. Now let's get you back to leveling up.
And that's such a good point again for people listening, that whenever there is that acute, perhaps event that didn't go the way you wanted it to go, even though the way you wanted it might not be the way you needed it to go to level up.
Right.
It's so easy to get sucked into that moment, and that being pulled out a bit to get the perspective can really, that's effectively how you level out any emotion attached to anything that's causing you a negative spike, right? To get that perspective and context.
Absolutely. It's a game changer. If you're able to do that, like you do not stay in that defeat mode.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
Because no one can excel if they stay there, right? That's such a key skill in anything, right? Whether that's Pedro managing his fund, or you on a wave, or, whoever, all of us. And in terms of your preparation, what was sort of the Could you talk us through that? Because again, I know there's a broad range of people listening to this, individuals from the military, from professional sport and trading, investing, and just ambitious young people, perhaps at the
Yeah.
beginning stage of their career. Maybe they're about to go off to Australia or their equivalent of an Australia. But what were some of the conditions that got the best out of you?
Well, I was alluding a bit to that, and I mean, in the surfing world, there is, and I've noticed this a lot with, again, kind of going back to coaching and because surfing conditions, there's such a big variability. It's such a, uh, um, an unpredictable playing field, right? It's constantly changing, and you're literally catching energy, right? I mean, these are bands of
Yeah,
energy that come and you're having to
yeah,
catch a wave at the exact moment that it's breaking. You're having to forecast if the wave is going to be a good wave or a bigger wave or a smaller wave or one that's longer or steeper. And so you're making these, minute decisions in fractions of sections, just to decide, should I go on this one? Should I go on the one behind? And so all of this is kind of, so if you connect to your medium, regardless of the conditions, so even if the winds are bad, and that's the thing. If you're lucky enough to even be at a beach, you got to take it. You got to really embrace that opportunity. And that's, I think, for professional sports, anyone, if you're able to even go to the gym and train, and that means that you're not, you know, lo and behold, that sometimes you do have these boring moments and you got to deal with them, or you have like through your life a boring period, or you have boring phases of training,
yeah,
whatever you want to call it, but you have to embrace that. And when you do that, and when you just go out, and even if the conditions are not ideal, but you just make that happen, that just gives you, I had a coach and he would, that's like putting money in the bank. It's like saving, and you're
totally.
just putting money in the bank. And so from a training perspective, I think that for me, that was always one of my, formulas, was definitely just go out regardless of the conditions, just go surfing
I
regardless of the.
love that. Yeah, I love that. And again, it just forces you to see your craft from a different angle, and then you learn something. And even if you consciously don't, your body picks it up. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant rule. How strict were you in terms of things like physical preparation with sleep, nutrition, hydration?
You,
Um,
I surfing got on a little bit later onto that, but that was a absolutely like key moment when I was on the world tour and when I qualified, and really understanding that big waves, because there's just so much.
mhm.
Injury prevention was always connected to time that you spent in the gym. And so when you were able to do that and just keep your body more limber, it was just something that it gave you a lot of confidence too. And so finding that balance between obviously time in the gym and the importance of that with the ocean time was always, something that was absolutely key. I was lucky. So I really, and nutrition, I think, is absolutely a key. I always had a balanced diet. I was just lucky that my parents kind of like really kind of instilled that in me. And so um, I didn't have like a diet performance specific, but it is something that whoever, does think about performance should always look at that, And I mean,
Yeah,
the basic stuff, I mean, to this day, sometimes people, they don't hydrate. And you're like, as an athlete, that is just such a basic thing, but it's basic for every single human being, like you have to hydrate. And
yeah,
so those little things of like being aware of your weight, how does that go? If at the time I was trying to gain a little bit of weight, and it was just really difficult. I have a very fast metabolism, and but just being aware of these things are things that help you, put more energy into something that will help you be more prepared, be, perform better, be a little bit stronger. And so, as I was saying, at the height of my training, the underwater training, I still think, and this is maybe more to the point, the breath work that you
mm,
do in underwater training, it's a little bit violent. So there was a point that I couldn't, it's not something like to do every day, although like breath work you can do every day. Apnea, which is basically working under duress of not holding your breath, because you become
yeah,
so carbon deprived. If you overdo it, you get lots of headaches and stuff. But that's a pretty extreme side of things. But the breath work as a cornerstone of, I would again say, just like hydration, I think that breath work is probably could solve so many problems that we have in our world, and again, across the board, at any, in any urban environment, any job you might have, anything that kind of is thrown at you, again, to put these kind of values into play, to, okay, this is fear, I'm feeling this emotion, this, how can I channel it into something positive? How can I not let this take over my actions? And breath is I mean, it's an ancient thing. It's not something, I'm just one more of the many who believe in it through personal experience, but I really, I mean, for anyone who has not, really got a little bit into it, I think it's just, it's again, it's those really big things that really completely changes your ability to deal with stress.
It's so interesting listening to you talked about that, because I agree, and I was lucky to do some training. I was actually with a guest who was on the podcast, Jason Henderson, and we were in Denmark, and we did some training with Stig Severinsen, who had a free diving world record.
Amazing.
And I was the powerful thing I took away from that was that moment where you feel like I need that breath, and you just calm, and you just let you're like, no, hey, hang on a minute, I'm in charge of my body, I'll tell you when we're going to get the breath, stop, like it was almost like a wild horse rearing or something. You're like, whoa, calm down.
Yeah.
And then it goes.
It's beautiful. It's amazing.
And then it's like, wow, I don't need a breath at all right now. It was
I
the
can
most
hang on here a bit longer. Yeah, it's
honestly,
amazing.
we had dinner that night, we were like, fucking hell, I wonder how many other areas of our life we have that mentality, where you're like, oh no, I really need whatever it might be, this, that, the other. And yeah,
And take a deep
phenomenal
breath. It's still, but that's the thing. Or if you do it, it does, I think, to really, keep helping you. There are these things that then they do need to become like daily habits or very frequent habits. Let's
they
say
can't compound, can they?
No.
This is it, right? And I think this is another thing I really wanted to talk to you about, was discipline, right? Because you talked about these practices, and obviously there's this like innate instinctual attraction to the ocean, surfing, like you said. Then you had these overlay of constraints, like I'm going in whatever the weather.
Yeah.
So what's your relationship with discipline?
I mean, I'll be honest in the sense that surfing, being so creative and being so free, it doesn't it's not a linear connection. But I do remember, and hopefully I'm not butchering this, but this is how I learned it. But Bob Dylan had this amazing quote as an artist, right? Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
And he said that discipline is the mother of all freedoms. So he connected discipline with freedom. And when you kind of see that is actually an amazing thing. And then that there's, short-term freedom and long-term freedom. And so when you kind of put time into this equation, then discipline becomes a freedom, source. But again, I think that even too much discipline can have, there is this issue of balance, in the sense that again, like the having fun, the surfer in me has to keep, how do you feed that? And so sometimes it is good to just eat a greasy burger, and come on, that if that makes you happy at that moment and you're aware of that, you should do it. If you want to go out with your mates a night and just have a bit of a crazy night with your mates,
absolutely.
I think but if you do that every day, or if you're doing it every single weekend, and if that is actually your discipline and that is your habit, then there's probably going to be something wrong. Something's going to break. But I think yearning or finding and keep searching for that balance, so that discipline doesn't break you also. And I think there is, because it is such an intangible, right? The purest form of discipline. I mean, and again, I really relate this a little bit to environmental movements in terms of our habits and what are we doing that can help the planet. And a lot of movements, they start bringing on this guilt. They start working on the guilt. Oh, you're not recycling enough, or you're part of the problem. And so that, I don't think, is the ideal engine of change. I think inspiration really is where it's at, because you want to change because you want to make a difference, you want to have a positive impact, because
Absolutely.
that is a decision. It's not like something that if you don't act in a certain way. And I think that then becomes there is a certain interpretation. You have some freedom in defining what your discipline is.
Yes.
But it exists. It's objective. It is something. So discipline exists. You can't relativize it, totally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, just because someone's discipline is, doing push-ups or doing this, it doesn't need to be yours. But
yeah, I love that. And that's the theme of everything we're talking about here, right? You do you. You're the expert on you, right?
Exactly.
In terms of the level you want to go, when and when not to push, when and when not to engage in certain behaviors. You might need a little more, I guess, emotional recovery than physical. So then you need to go. Sometimes the best thing to do, and I've seen this with, professional athletes, sometimes the best thing to do for the athlete is to no, you're not training tomorrow. We're going to go for a few beers. We're going to chill the fuck out. And we're going to last 3 hours solid. Yeah. And we will recharge the emotional, mental aspect. And we'll sacrifice 5% physically for a few days. That's fine.
That's fine. We'll come back on it, and we'll come back stronger. And again, it's really that emotional balance. It's absolutely key. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think one of the things I keep thinking about listening to you is this, again, that ability to that introspection. A friend, Gorm Thomason, talks about this a lot. He was on the podcast. He talked a lot about introspection, being able to actually listen to yourself in that respect, in terms of whether that's risk or discipline or all these things we're talking about here.
Yeah, I fully agree, because you have to almost distinguish, is this, is this internal conversation me trying to get away from one of my tasks, or from one, is this me tweaking my discipline, or is this something that my spirit, my body, my mind is asking for? And I think that ability to trust yourself and trust your introspection, but have, like we were discussing, normally people around you that remind you, okay, this is great. Imagine the other extreme. You're resting a lot. You're going out with your friends a bunch. Okay. Hey, but the results, they're kind of going down a little bit. I mean, maybe it's time to, get back in the gym again, and so
damn right.
It's it's introspection. That's wonderful.
And I have to ask you, what a career you've had, and I know you're only sort of at the beginning. Well, you got your best years ahead of you in a lot of ways. But what's been a peak experience so far on your journey, where everything came together and you just delivered all of your technical ability? Is there one moment that stands out for you?
Well, I think that wave that I sent you, I think that in terms of a moment, I think that, results in competition and certain heats that you make, and
we'll put that one up on the screen right now, actually.
But I think that one was because it was a really challenging morning. I mean, there was a lot of buzz in the media about the swell. So the lead up to that was really, I mean, it was just like a pressure cooker, just to the max. And my friend, so there's always a lot of teamwork. Eric Riviere, he's one of the best, arguably the best pilot in the world, in terms of jet ski driving. And so, he just has this knowledge of the ocean. And so the connection to the driver in this case, obviously at surface, we all have to be drivers too.
Of course.
That's kind of the World Surf League format, which is interesting. In an individual sport, it actually then becomes like a double. So there is this team component in big waves that is now even celebrated in competition. But so it was kind of like one of the guys in the team, got really injured. He lost some equipment. And so by the time my team wasn't really, so I kind of piggybacked literally a bit onto his team. So I kind of my team wasn't available. And so I just went in the water with really, not high expectations, but just kind of okay, here we are again, the same thing. But as the hours went by, it's just it kind of grows on you, and just how big the surf was and just how everything was happening. And then that accident that I mentioned. And so, and then it was my turn, and then it was oh my God, wow. Okay.
What
But
goes through your head in those moments when you get the nod there?
oh my God, it's just like, I mean, you've got to really clear everything. You just have to like literally, that's the thing. Everything has to be cleared. You
And
have
how
to,
do you do that? Do you start to zero your focus on certain things? Do you start talking? What's the first
yeah,
thing?
there's a lot. I mean, my self-talk was really just embracing what was going on around me. So I'll be honest, like sometimes it's some pretty funny things, but you just like zero in on a seagull that's just there in that moment,
Okay.
and it's just like flying and just kind of going really close to the waves, and it's just something that's just like really risky too for the seagull, I guess, you know. But
Yeah.
there they are, just kind of cruising around, and so you're in the water, and you're just like, wow. I mean, you know, it's amazing that I'm here. So that's a lot of my self talk. I'm just kind of constantly reminding myself about how lucky I am to be in this, in that moment, to be part of, in this case, the Nazaré, you know. Show, yeah, and it's just something that for me that helped me a lot, calm me down, and just feel present, and just to want to go and do it.
And then do your instincts just take over? The training
Take
takes over as soon as you start seeing things, your body just right, boom, and
boom.
the bell going in the boxing ring, right? The
It's
ring
like
walk is probably the most nervous. That's almost your ring walk, right?
it's yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a moment when, you know, when we're looking at the ocean and we're trying to pick the wave and trying to see, you know, and forecast what's going to happen. And so that's that symbiosis with the driver. But you know, so you can imagine the jet ski, and then there's a rope attaching us. And so when we get picked up, it is that moment. Okay, we're on. Okay,
Yeah.
what's going to happen? And then you just really, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. It's just you just absolutely focus in, zero in on that moment, and try to, like, when you let go of the rope, you know that you're completely on your own, and it's just focusing all your energy into controlling the surfboard, controlling the speed, you know, keeping your line, um, and just I mean, absolutely present. You know, in that wave, there's a moment that the wave was so big that the shadow of the cascading lip, it just got dark, and I was going down, and I felt like, oh my God, I'm going so fast, I'm gonna outrun this thing like no problem whatsoever. And then suddenly the shadow of the wave was over me, and I was like, oh my God, like it's gonna crush me. I'm gonna get. It was a split set. It wasn't even. I didn't really, honestly, I didn't think I was gonna be crushed, but my awareness of like the darkness that suddenly was around me, and I was like, you know, okay, no, you know, there's no conscious thought. I just noticed that, but it just kept me, you know. Thank God I didn't for 1 second think that I wasn't going to make it. I
Yeah.
think if there is noise in those moments, that's dangerous. And I've had wipeouts when there is a conscious thought that interferes,
Okay.
something that, you know, that fraction of a second of doubt that kind of gets you out of
Hesitation.
frequency. Yeah.
Yeah.
and that
Wow.
and that happens, but that's the beauty of you know of being in that moment. But it's the flow state, right? It's just that flow state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is there anything particularly that was, or anything particular that was unique about that moment for you that made it so special?
I mean, that's maybe why I latch onto that. But that moment of like almost darkness, that
Okay.
the wave was going to engulf me, and I just blocked it, and I just kind of stuck to my line, and then the whole thing exploded. I like disappeared, and then I just felt I was going to make it. I just kind of deep down knew that I was going to make it, and then, you know, and then flying out,
Yeah.
it was just pure bliss. It was just
Oh,
pure
it's an
joy.
epic watch. Certainly enjoyed watching it. I think that's one for me on the sofa or standing on the beach with a nice cold beer, clapping you
Yeah.
on. I have to flip that question on its head now and ask you what's been perhaps the most terrifying moment or moment where you're like, you know, you've really thought, oh fuck, like, and again, it doesn't have to be in terms of danger, like literally dangerous. And this is what's so ironic, speaking in your world, you know, the risk is very real, but just where you are like, I'm not really not sure I have what it takes here, and I don't want to be here. We
Yeah.
inevitably all have them.
I mean, it's impossible not to go through that. I
Yeah.
mean, I feel, especially in this field, you know, with big waves, and the ocean at such a kind of even if it's beautiful, the winds are good, it's angry, and so but and this was actually, again, we were kind of talking about these turning points. And I when I came back from California, I was paddling, so it's one of the disciplines of big wave surfing is that you catch the waves, kind of paddling with your own energy, right? So it's a big wave gun, it's a 10-foot board. And I had come back from Mavericks and the World Tour was paddling. And so I was really kind of on that edge of paddling more at Nazaré. And that ended up being, my entry into the Nazaré Hall of Fame. That was kind of like all connected to paddling giant waves with the board. And so I was kind of just pushing myself. And at the time, there was just a really massive day, and everyone was towing, and I just decided in my mind that I was going to paddle it, and one of my friends kind of dropped me off, and it was a little bit of a cliche thing. It was like, yeah, I'll keep an eye on you. It's kind of like in the middle of the maelstrom, but and so I was just working on my positioning, and I just missed a wave, and so there was kind of like I was just trying to find that position. I mean, it's even more increased difficulty because obviously you don't have the power of the jet ski. So the jet ski definitely it's like a technology. It just tremendously helps the access. And so paddling is still very important for big wave surfing as a whole. And there's a lot of discussions within our world about, the importance, and young guys coming up, they have to keep paddling because it just is such a magnified experience. So with the jet ski, normally you can catch a lot of waves, but paddling, if you catch one wave, is just so much more memorable. And so what happened was that, I was just looking for my positioning. And then suddenly, if you can imagine, the horizon and the waves come, suddenly I went too far in. So, I was looking for a wave and I was just risking. So risk means you're coming more and more towards shore where the waves are breaking more consistently. And I went in a bit too far. And so what happened was suddenly the whole horizon just disappeared. It just was a massive wall of water, like Moses. It was crazy, and I was like, I can't believe this. And there was no one there. I mean, I was completely solo at that moment.
Wow.
And I was like, but you have a couple of seconds before the wave hits you. And so I just remember like, oh my God, like this, I mean, this is not good, but like, I cannot get into panic. Like this is not an option. And so I was like, okay, here we go, like, in God's hands, as we say, and I just kind of like went through my drill, and I was able to kind of hold my breath. I mean, it was an absolutely brutal whooping, like it just like took me for a ride underwater. I mean, it was like super violent. I came up, I got hit by one more giant wave, and then a third, and then out of nowhere, a friend of mine actually comes, and he comes to kind of pick me up, and he's like. And I remember at that time I was already safe in the sense that I didn't lose my senses, so I dealt with it, and I was getting close to shore, so to safety. And he comes up and he says, "Hey, do you want to come back out?" And I remember,
Fuck
and
you.
I remember to this day, like, gosh, is this an opportunity or is the guy wanting to kill me, once and for all? But I'm so glad that I grabbed it. I said, yeah, let's try this one more time. And then I caught a massive, massive wave that day paddling. And it was one of those really special turning points. It was a really special one.
Something up with you guys. Something up. Let's talk about again the other side of that then, like the rest recovery piece. How after a day like that, how do you flick the off switch? Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, we celebrate. We go out and we do, we have a couple of drinks with our friends. I mean, if there's a swell the next day, yes, you kind of tame it, obviously. But that was kind of like, you just really, I mean, you really feel alive. I mean, there's just nothing that can kind of, topple you down after a day like that. And so a lot of it was, and then, over time, and some of the guys, they would fly out the next day. So I remember Greg Long, he was amazing sometimes, like after a swell, he would still go chase that swell. I did that a couple of times, and you changed a little bit. So like, then you are into just pure hydration mode. Okay, I'm gonna go to sleep, as quick as possible. I'm already going to the airport. And so
Oh,
you
wow.
really kind of put your body through a lot of things. And
Yeah.
I do remember like sometimes the getting ready before like a contest. So even it was something that still to this day stuck to me. Like if you have done a good enough preparation the night before, even if you don't sleep that much, you can still perform at the highest level. I mean, if you
Yeah.
really want it. And so there are things that your body can really sustain that, normally you wouldn't think that it would. And so I think that there is, again, that this just even if things within your preparation, like again, you don't fully you didn't get these are things, again, if you're too attached to your habits. Imagine you're always used to eating eggs, and you get to some place on the other
Yeah.
side of the world and they don't have eggs, and you have to eat potatoes. I mean, you have to have a little bit of flexibility in your mindset, so that even if things are not exactly how you are, there's so many stories about this, like guys, I think sometimes it's even like a nervous reaction. They wake up with fever, before a big race or something for
Yeah.
runners. And so I do think for me, like the turning off. So after it really are a big contest. It's just like, I mean, you deserved it. You deserve to kind of like just, you know, hang out with your friends, hang out with family, like just let go, in that moment, and then, just get ready for the next challenge. But and to this day, I think these moments are important. Even if it is like a small, big enough victory, let's say, in whatever you're doing, there is this moment that it really does recharge your batteries to just soak that in, like you earned it,
Absolutely.
and I think that is also something, a lesson. And I remember some of these guys, I mean, some of the like guys like Greg Long, I mean, they have burnouts. So if you don't honor this, then you actually stay months, or sometimes it's the
Yeah.
end of your
You're
career.
paying the price somewhere, right?
It's going to come up. And so you gotta find that way of enjoying it, and just like embracing that moment. And I think the longevity of my career was very much due to that, because I was balancing, I was doing, other things that just kept me very grateful to be in that moment when the giant waves were coming, when the big swell, or focusing my energy into Nazaré. And so really becoming a
Absolutely.
local at that spot, and putting everything I had into it.
Amazing. And in terms of some of those individuals that you've shared the stage with, I guess, if you had to pick one to compete for your life, who would it be in terms of the individuals you've had the privilege to either train with or compete against?
In terms of what, companionship, or
Just pure ability, pure performance.
I mean, there's this Hawaiian guy who was part of Kelly Slater's Momentum generation, a guy called Shane Dorian.
Okay.
And I remember watching him in the water, and it was just next level. I mean, it just felt completely untouchable what he was doing. I mean, it was like, it was like we were, racing with go-karts, and he was in a Formula One car. It was just like,
Wow.
I mean, it was just outstanding. I mean, just his perception, how deep he could go, how steep the waves he was riding. It was something unbelievable. And the lines he was taking already on these big wave boards, it was, I mean, it was fascinating to see. And then to study the footage. I mean, I remember once I rode a wave with him. He was deeper than me, and he took off like what felt like miles deeper than me. So, I mean, you can imagine a very steep face. And the difficulty, or where the progression was to actually be able to angle down that face. But
Okay.
it's something so sensitive. And the term, the surf term, is like when you are able to knife it. So knifing it means that you're actually going sideways down this vertical wall. And but the way that you control your equipment to do that is extremely difficult. And so we were just trying to like catch the wave. That was like, where we were at. And if we could just hang on and go straight down, it was unbelievable. And those were incredible rides. but he was already doing that. And so he was taking off way deeper, so way further out. And he was being able, because he was doing this, to catch up to us. And I remember that was like just a performance blast it was amazing to witness and to see his reaction and his humbleness and just the happiness that he had to be with us in the water. And he was still hooting us, and still saying, wow, what a ride, also. But he was just he was working on a different level.
Amazing. And now, in the context of your career now, what's most important to you? What are you most excited about in terms of the current projects you've got going on?
Well, I guess that's exactly, all of this. It just feels like it's been setting me up for this moment. It's crazy, it really does, because I'm being able to just focus every single thing that I'm doing into this environmental project in Nazaré, which has been a place that has given so much to me over the years, and transforming that energy into an ocean conservation project that through the Hope Zones Foundation, and that's our vessel to get the work out there, and we're doing everything we can. We're set to launch a seaweed farm in October in the ocean in Nazaré, and it's basically like a test tube that can really open up conversations about innovation within the blue space, right? So planting seaweed is something that is innovating in how the ocean is such a wonderful resource, for us, as obviously as surfers, as people who enjoy recreation. It is that side, let's say, of surfing, but also matching that a little bit with the problems that overfishing has brought. And by planting seaweed, we're finding like an entrepreneurial way of being part of helping biodiversity, of being part of the carbon sequestration issue. And so it's just something that I'd never thought, 3-4 years ago, that I'd even be remotely connected to. And it's kind of like a farmer of the sea. And so it's just something that, and it just has been unleashing so many things and really being able to tap into all these lessons that, you're reminding me here, James, which is great. But I think about them a lot, and it really does help me in this chapter of my life to apply so much of these learnings and really, go hell or high water, and that's such a beautiful place to be when you're that dedicated and that passionate about something. Again, and yes, it's not the thrill of catching waves, but it is a thrill of having a positive impact, and it is a thrill of doing that in a place that has been so special. So I go back to it and I reconnect with the location and the geography, and it's just a big blessing. It's a big privilege to be doing that.
It's incredible, and you can hear your passion for it when you speak. And again, it sounds like you're just leveraging everything you're talking about. Again, practicing what you preach in terms of, I guess, the introspection, listening to yourself, and following those signs. And a term you use, that connecting the dots piece, right? How interesting! It's so interesting, isn't it? How things at the time that you think, why is this here? There's a reason that you in the moment you can't quite configure.
And we mentioned it a little while ago in our conversation, when I was like, the fact that I did do college now compared to a lot of my colleagues, professional surfers and stuff. It's giving me a massive advantage in the sense that I'm dealing with the inevitable paperwork that comes with, putting things in action and dealing with licensing and dealing with this or dealing with that. And so it's just something that has positioned me, just like you said, perfectly, because all these dots, because now I'm embracing them in a way that has positioned me where I am right now, and that's a great place, because Nazaré does not have environmental work very active, because it is an entrenched fishing community, and at the same time, my professional surfing background and being a Nazaré surfer also gives me a legitimacy within that community, and so all of these things really do add up in a way that
you couldn't do what you're doing to the level you just couldn't, could you? You wouldn't have the influence or the
it wouldn't have this impact.
Ironically, if you had to design the perfect development pathway for someone to solve this problem, it'd basically be your life, right?
It's crazy. And when you kind of like just but that's something maybe this is what you're I think we all have that, and I yes, for sure I feel really lucky and blessed and for sure privileged in that sense. But it also it did take work, because there were a lot of like setbacks and it didn't make sense. And I think that's
And the
it's a
rest,
great
mate. Risk,
takeaway.
discipline, talent. Oh, yeah, what you've been through to do what you've done, it's incredible.
But it propels us here, that's
Yeah,
exactly it.
exactly. And we're just getting started. This is yeah, we'll get back on in a couple of years. Couple of years I'll give you, and then we can talk about the next
Let's do that.
big problem you
Absolutely,
can solve.
Jay. For
I do
sure.
want to I've got a few more questions I want to ask. Just maybe I want to ask you, right? So let's say there's someone listening to this conversation and maybe they know they've got a bit more in themselves. But for whatever reason, they're just stuck in a bit of a funk and they can't quite get going. What, of course, you've given some advice for this conversation, but what would the take-home message be for you to someone like that in that scenario or mindset?
I think I was listening to something that I thought was really beautiful in the sense, but very direct. TNT is like dynamite, but it's
Yeah.
actually a you might have heard this, right? It takes no talent.
Oh, no, I haven't heard that. No.
And it's a wonderful thing because I think in those really kind of tricky, moments, if you do things that take no talent, you're releasing yourself from maybe your aspiration or maybe the vision or maybe, these longer term goals that sometimes are so difficult on a day-to-day basis to actually start,
See the link.
climbing that mountain, right? How, what's that first step? And there never is a perfect first step because there's going to be a second, a third, and a fourth, and and all of that. So I think, I mean, literally, and I say this to a lot of like, aspiring surfing pros, wake up early, you know, just wake up
Okay.
early. Yes, okay, you can have the freedom. Maybe you just need to wake up at 8, wake up at 6 or 7, whatever it is that challenge yourself to give
That's
yourself.
not early in the UK, mate. Might be
Yeah.
early in Portugal.
No, 6 is super normal. But okay, so
I'm
if you're a 6
joking.
a.m. person,
I get it. Yeah.
but you know what I mean? Sometimes here, and I noticed that, and I mean, again, 8 is like super late, right? I
Yeah.
mean, come on.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes, I mean, for young pros or again, or if you're in a funk and if you only need to be at work at 8 or I think, I mean, or maybe it's the tail end of the day, uh, but I think the waking up early for, for surfing is something that because then it just puts discipline on the end of your day. So you
Yeah.
have to end it at a certain day,
Starting with a win's good, right? When you do, and you're up before, it's like a clear statement to your unconscious mind, isn't it? That, oh, I'm in charge again. What
exactly,
else am I in charge of? And it
exactly.
spirals, doesn't it?
It's a positive spiral. And
Yeah.
then if you have like a morning drill, again, that's where I think you're giving yourself a bit more time for be it breath work, be it for some physical, whatever stretches or, whatever, you can do that. Obviously you're not waking up that early to then be, scrolling on the phone. I mean, that then you're kind of killing
It's a
the
recipe
purpose
for
of it.
disaster. Yeah.
Yeah. But definitely, I think it's just trying to pick something that is relatively simple, but that does require a pretty high level of discipline and then self victory to, but don't ask yourself right away like a huge thing, like,
Yeah.
so, you know, if you're waking up at 6, don't try to wake up at 3, like maybe
Okay.
wake up
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
5 or 4:30, just something. I think it's the increments that help you. You
Better is
want,
better.
yeah,
Yeah.
and you want to feel some progress. You don't want to like if and this is the art of short-term goals, right? It's just that thing that it stretches yourself, but you're not making something that it's just too unattainable. And then if you're constantly not reaching it, then it's going to be a big. You got to keep your self-esteem high. You cannot put yourself down constantly because your spirit won't survive.
I love that. I love the way you use the term spirit as well. I think it's really appropriate word for what we're talking about there. And I wanted to finish with some quick fire questions, if that's okay.
Sure.
Favorite movie?
Favorite movie? Well, it just popped to my mind, The Matrix. Yeah, for
Ah,
sure.
cool. Yeah,
I can
okay.
I can go with that one.
That makes sense. Favorite series?
A Game of Thrones,
Oh,
it was a very
brilliant.
community thing, and I saw it with with the mom of my son at the time, and we would all get together and watch it together. So yeah, I can hang with that one.
Brilliant. Do you have a favorite book?
Um, you know, I'm just thinking of, yes, Watchmen by Alan Moore.
Okay, cool.
So it's a graphic novel, right?
Yeah. And greatest athlete of all time?
I mean, the surfer in me, I would, between Kelly Slater and Shane Dorian. So the surfer in
Okay.
me would say Kelly Slater.
Okay. Greatest team of all time?
Um, Greatest team of all time across all sports, right? Um, this might be a bit predictable. I'll say Sporting because that's who I'm
Yeah.
connected
I
to.
thought it might have been that or the Portugal national team when they won their European Cup.
That was something. Yeah,
Yeah, that
that was
was
something.
cool.
Absolutely. That's a league.
Yeah. And do you have is there and the last one was to be personal mantra. Is there anything, do you have a favorite
I do.
quote or personal mantra?
I do. It's gratitude.
And you know what? That's
So
so
in
funny
all,
because
and that how that unfolds. But thank you. Right?
it's because that's what I've just felt listening to you talk. Like this whole conversation from the first moment, I thought, wow, I really feel Yao's gratitude for his journey. And I felt that the whole way through. That's so interesting. It's very healthy.
Yes. No. And but again, I mean, going back to this, you have to feed it. It's something that I remember once
Such
doing
an important point.
a public speaking engagement with a group of doctors, and you would think, gosh, these guys are like drained in gratitude because they're saving people's lives all the time, and obviously from their perspective, they're thinking about the ones that they didn't save, right? So there's that, but also one of the guys, he was like really just fascinated with the work that needs to be done daily to feel it because you might have been lucky enough to feel gratitude for something a couple of days ago or a week ago or a month or a year or 2 years ago, but you need to feed that feeling. You need to like you need to like there are actually some companies that do there's gratitude Tuesdays or something like that because
Yeah.
you need to find some drills for that because it just kind of vanishes. It's like a tank of gas or something, and as you keep using it, you use it up. And so if you don't put gratitude tokens back in there, it's not there, and then you might need it. We go back to this thing. Then when you need it, you're kind of off foot. So I would just add that you need to there is a discipline. There is a work connected to it, and that's important to keep it active within your spirit.
I couldn't agree more. And I think you've articulated that so well. And personally, it's something I do most evenings. And that the periods
Yeah,
of time I forget to or it slips, boy, I notice it in
you
my
notice it.
baseline mood. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Negativity, frustration,
It
more
sits in.
more like burning, like a lot more like redhead type feeling without that.
Exactly. Oh, I guess thanks, James. Another very influential book is it's called Blue Mind, and it was a friend of mine. It's actually, yeah, gosh, I think I might. Yeah, I have it here. It's always here.
We'll put the links up to these
I mean,
and
he
to all your
passed
environmental work.
away, Jay Wallace. So the subtitle, "The
Right.
Surprising Science That Shows You How Being Near, In, On, or Underwater Can Make You Happier, Healthier, More Connected, and Better at What You Do." So Jay Wallace, he passed away last June, um, and
Well, I'm
he was
glad he left that.
yeah, he definitely left this beautiful body of work. And again, he was also a mentor. I didn't mention him in our conversation, but he was I was blessed enough to meet him, and he was a great person, and a visionary of the, you know, kind of the ocean conservation movements. He was a really creative guy.
Oh, brilliant. I'm going to check that out. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm going for a cold swim in the sea tonight, actually, and I don't think I've ever been more excited after this conversation with you.
Oh man,
it's absolute perfect for my sea swim tonight. I've missed the last week or two, and yeah, I want to get in the ocean.
You won't miss this one, I hope. Absolutely.
No chance,
Yeah,
no chance, mate. Look, thank you so much. I absolutely loved this conversation, and hopefully I get to see you soon.
That would be great. Yeah, please give me a buzz when you're here in Portugal. And
definitely.
Thanks for the conversation, James.
Absolutely. Fun. All the best, mate. Bye.
Take care, man. All the best.
Whilst I hope you've enjoyed our conversation, the magic happens when you put the principles to work by aligning yourself with them. People who listen to podcasts like this tend to fall into one of two categories. The first experiences a high that fades, and before they know it, it's back to business as usual. Nothing changes. The second group, your group, also feel the high, but they sustain it and go on to achieve significant change. What distinguishes the two? Putting these lessons or principles to work immediately. This is potentially game-changing information. I've seen it, but it can't change anything if you don't act on it. Remember, this is not just for accelerating excellence, but also for maximizing your quality of life. There is always a way to optimize. And the secret to becoming everything you can be is to just start. So if something resonated with you in this conversation, act on it. Excellence is just a series of days repeated over and over again. So go on the attack and win your day. Chances are you know someone that needs to listen to this conversation. Please make sure to share a link with them and keep me updated with how you get on. Make sure you slam any questions in the comments or reach out directly. I've got you covered. In 2021, I published my first book, Accelerating Excellence. If you're finding the conversations and information on this podcast useful, you're going to find the book useful. The book is more of an operation manual. It's a step-by-step guide on how to implement all this stuff so you can get maximum benefit. It's a #1 bestseller filled with highly actionable strategies you can apply today to become better tomorrow. Head to jamesaking.com to download 6 chapters free in audio or digital format. The full book's available on Amazon, Audible, or at your local bookstore. All links are in the show notes. The game has changed. The players have changed. The hard truth is it has become harder to identify elite performers to drive your organization forward and ignite a winning mentality within today's workforce. Without the right talent, without the right mentality, and without the right performance systems to deliver these, outlier performance will remain your goal, not your reality. At A6 Partners, we solve this problem every day in the most demanding arenas. The talent, the mentality, it's there. It is possible. Our performance systems are not designed to tick boxes, tolerate bias, or ensure comfort. They are designed to ensure performance where performance is all that matters. We embed elite performance systems to attract and select the right people and develop and motivate those people. From short, sharp, sledgehammer, intensive change programs, right through to long-term sustained partnership. We work with our partners to transition your organization into a magnet for elite talent and embed a systematic process for selecting winners. We build world-class development programs to transform raw talent into sustained high performance. We instill winning cultures that set and live by their own demanding standards, resulting in a team of autonomous, high-performing, and resilient problem solvers who deliver. Our team of consultants is comprised of the outlier individuals I've worked with firsthand over decades. This includes PhD performance scientists, senior British and American Special Forces operators, Olympic gold medal winning coaches, world leading psychologists, and C-level leaders from trading and investing. For us, second place is not an option. If you're sick to death of mediocrity and truly want your team to excel, then click the link in show notes and get in touch now.